Open Anderson's Popular History of the United States from 1880. Look up what it says about Columbus. Columbus believed the Earth to be round. Now open the same author's textbook from 1898, just 18 years later. The Earth was flat as a plate. One of the most successful lies in Western history was manufactured in just 18 years by textbook authors rewriting their own books. I went through the medieval manuscripts. Bede's Reckoning of Time from 725, Johannes the Sacrobosco's Sphere, the standard university astronomy textbook from 1230, used for 400 years, surviving in hundreds of manuscripts. They all explicitly describe a spherical Earth. The flat Earth myth was invented by three specific men to win culture wars after Darwin. Washington Irving in 1828, a novelist who fabricated a dramatic scene for his Columbus biography. John Williams Draper in 1874, angry at the Catholic Church, turned fiction into anti-religious propaganda. And Andrew Dickson White in 1896, he buried the lie under a mountain of footnotes and got it into every textbook. Between 1870 and 1920, this fabrication entered the curriculum, and it's still being taught today, despite historians debunking it for 30 years. Here's how they did it and why it persists. And here's what's at stake when we get medieval history this wrong. The knowledge that the Earth is a sphere didn't start in the Middle Ages. It started with the ancient Greeks. And they didn't just theorize it, they measured it. In 240 BC, Eratosthenes of Cyrene used sticks and shadows to calculate the Earth's circumference. We know this from later Greek writers like Cleomedes and Strabo, who preserved his method. At noon on the summer solstice in Syene, modern Aswan, a vertical stick cast no shadow. The sun was directly overhead. But in Alexandria, at the same exact time, a stick cast a shadow at 7.2 degrees. If the sun's rays are parallel, the only reason for different shadow angles is the curvature of the Earth's surface. 7.2 degrees is 1/50th of a circle. So the distance between the two cities, about 5,000 stadia, is 1/50th of the Earth's circumference. Total circumference, 250,000 stadia, roughly 29,000 miles. The actual circumference, 23,901 miles. In 240 BC, using sticks and shadows, he got within 15%. This was standard geography taught throughout the classical world and inherited by medieval scholars. Jump to the year 630. The Dark Ages have supposedly begun. Isidore of Seville writes the Etymologies, the encyclopedia of the medieval ages. Isidore defines day and night in Book 3, Chapter 51. When the sun rises, it creates the day, and when it sets, it brings on the night, for day is the sun over the earth, and night is the sun under the earth. The sun under the earth. If the earth were a flat disk, how would you explain night? The sun goes behind a mountain, gets extinguished. It doesn't go under the ground you're standing on. For the sun to pass under the earth has to be three-dimensional. It requires a globe. Now, jump to 1230. Johannes the Sacrobosco writes Tractatus de Spheriae, treatise on the sphere. Here's the critical thing. This was the standard astronomy textbook for 400 years, required reading at every university in Europe. What did it teach? Chapter 1 provides sensory proofs for the globe. The most famous, the ship and mast observation. Sacrobosco writes, when a ship approaches land, a signal on shore is visible from the masthead after it has disappeared from the sight of someone at the foot of the mast. And there's no other explanation of this thing than the bulge of the water. Medieval students weren't debating whether the Earth was round. They were learning spherical geometry, how latitude changes which stars you see, how the celestial equator intersects the horizon differently in Cairo versus London. You cannot explain these observations without a precise three-dimensional model of a spherical Earth. But maybe you're thinking, okay, scholars knew, what about regular people? It was public knowledge, literally in the king's hand. This is the globus cruciger, the royal orb, a golden sphere surmounted by a cross. Medieval kings held this in coronation ceremonies from the 11th century onwards. What did it represent? Isidore of Seville explained. Augustus is said to have established the orb as a standard, so that he might the more display the figure of the globe. The sphere represents the earth. The cross represented Christ's sovereignty over it. Were there any medieval writers who thought the earth was flat? Yes, of course. Two marginal figures, Lactantius in the 4th century and Cosmas Indicopleustes in the 6th. As historian Geoffrey Burton Russell put it, Cosmas had no followers whatsoever. They were outliers, ignored by the mainstream. The consensus was clear. Most people have heard some version of the same story. Columbus standing in front of churchmen who insist the earth is flat. That scene is usually presented as medieval ignorance versus modern thinking. What almost nobody is told is that the scene is supposed to have a specific setting. A meeting in 1486 known as the Council of Salamanca. And once you know that, an obvious question follows. If medieval scholars already knew the earth was round, what was Columbus actually arguing about at Salamanca? Not shape, size. Columbus made a catastrophic double error, and we know this from his own writings and navigational logs that survive. Error number 1. He thought the earth was smaller. Columbus's estimate was about 20,000 miles circumference. How did he come to this calculation? He used measurements from a medieval Persian geographer named Alfraganus, who said 1 degree equals 56 2/3 of a mile. But Columbus thought Alfraganus meant the Roman mile. Alfraganus actually meant the Arabic mile, which was nearly 50% longer. This compounded his error. Columbus estimated the voyage at about 20% of its actual length. Error number 2. He thought Asia was bigger. He wildly overestimated how far Asia extended east. Consequently, Columbus thought the distance from Spain to Japan was maybe 2,500 miles. The scholars at Salamanca correctly calculated it was closer to 12,500 miles. The royal commission at Salamanca wasn't a panel of ignorant monks citing the Bible. It was headed by Hernando de Talavera, Queen Isabella's confessor. The commission included professors of astronomy, geography, mathematics, including the Jewish astronomer Rabbi Abraham Zacuto. How do we know what they argued? We know from the two main sources. Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish historian and Dominican friar who had access to Columbus's papers and interviewed people who were there, and Ferdinand Columbus, Christopher's own son, who wrote a biography of his father. According to these accounts, the commission told Columbus his numbers were wrong, not that the earth was flat, that it was too big. They correctly argued that if the ocean was 12,500 miles wide, Columbus's ships couldn't carry enough food and water. His crew would starve. And they were right. Columbus was saved by dumb luck. If the Americas hadn't been sitting exactly where he thought Asia was, his voyage would have been a complete disaster. But history doesn't like stories about optimistic failures who get lucky. History likes heroes battling ignorance. Washington Irving gave history that hero. In 1828, he invented an entire scene, Columbus at the Council of Salamanca, arguing with foolish churchmen who insisted the earth must be flat, pounding tables, citing scripture, a scene that never happened. Historian Samuel Eliot Morison later debunked it. This is pure moonshine. Washington Irving, scenting his opportunity for a picturesque and moving scene, took a fictitious account and let his imagination go completely. But it was a bestseller. The dramatic scene burned into the public imagination as historical fact. Irving gave the world a simple story. Enlightened Columbus versus flat earth religious zealots. It was fiction, but it was useful fiction, and that brings us to the perpetrators. Washington Irving was a novelist, not a historian. He was writing a romantic epic for a young American nation looking for heroic founding figures. But every hero needs a villain. And the dry logistical debate about the Earth's circumference, not so very dramatic. So he fabricated the Salamanca confrontation. Columbus forced to argue against ignorant clerics insisting the Earth was flat. It sold 10,000 copies immediately. Irving created a story, but why did it have such a staying power? Because it was waiting for someone to weaponize it. 46 years later, John William Draper takes Irving's account and turns it into a weapon. In 1874, Draper publishes History of the Conflict Between Religion and Science. That title says it all. This book was designed to prove that science and religion are fundamentally incompatible, locked in perpetual war. And to prove this massive thesis, Draper needed historical evidence. Smoking guns showing religion actively suppressing scientific truth. Draper was writing with a very specific target, the Roman Catholic Church. His book came out just 4 years after the Vatican declared papal infallibility in 1870, a decision that caused massive backlash amongst liberal intellectuals. Draper seized the moment. He used the flat earth myth as Exhibit A. The Church had systematically opposed scientific progress throughout history. The Council of Salamanca was his star witness. The book again was a bestseller. It went through over 50 printings and it armed a whole generation of secular thinkers with what they thought was undeniable historical ammunition. Irving created the story, Draper provided the ideological engine. And then, 22 years later, Andrew Dickinson White provides the final piece, institutional backing. White's massive 2-volume work, A History of the Warfare of Science with Theology in Christendom, came out in 1896. Modern historians call it more propaganda than history. White was the co-founder and first president of Cornell University, a major force in the movement for secular education in America. His technique? Sheer volume. He buried the flat earth story in an avalanche of footnotes and historical anecdotes. Many cherry-picked, misleading or just wrong. He created an impression of overwhelming scholarly evidence. By citing Irving and Draper, White gave the fiction an air of academic respectability, and thereby the lie flows from popular book to scholarly framework to textbook to common knowledge. Why did this specific myth become orthodoxy? Why did it beat out 70 years of solid historical evidence to the contrary? Because it fulfilled a powerful cultural need. In the late 1800s, intellectual elites were fighting a culture war. Darwin's Origin of Species came out in 1859. The Catholic Church declared papal infallibility in 1870. Draper and White weren't neutral historians. They were aggressive participants. They used the flat earth myth to prove a dethronement narrative, that brave science overcomes backward religion. The flat earth story was the perfect weapon. It was simple, dramatic, emotionally satisfying. It served the secular story of redemption, contrasting the dark ages with the sunlit uplands of modern reason. And once it entered textbooks, it became nearly impossible to remove. Which brings us to the question, if historians debunked this 30 years ago, why is this still being thought? Here's the chronological disparity that illustrates how misinformation works. Historian Jeffrey Burton Russell surveyed 19th century American history textbooks. Before 1870, very few mentioned the flat earth myth. After 1880, almost all of them featured the legend. The lie entered the culture between 1828 and 1896. By the time historians started debunking it seriously in the 1990s, the lie had a 150-year head start. Jeffrey Burton Russell's Inventing the Flat Earth came out in 1991. That should have ended it. It didn't. The truth never reached the textbooks or culture at large. Why? Because the lie is more exciting than the truth. The truth is that the medieval period was intellectually complex. The Roman Catholic Church never even took an official stance on the Earth's shape. That's boring. The lie is that brave Columbus fought ignorant priests who thought he'd sail off the edge of the world. That's dramatic. It fits a bigger story we want to believe. The lone genius against the ignorant mob. The story feels more true than the truth, and that's the systemic weakness. This is a case study in the lag between academic knowledge and public knowledge. Powerful, emotionally satisfying stories are sticky. They're impervious to evidence, which is a huge lesson for right now. Between 2020 and 2023, trust in science dropped 15%. Today, 27% of Americans have little to no confidence in scientists. And one of the tools undermining that trust is this exact myth. Modern flat earthers claim the church used to teach that the earth was flat, as proof that experts suppress the truth. They use this to justify rejecting climate science, vaccine research, and evolution. Research shows a gateway effect. Belief in one historical myth makes it easier to believe contemporary conspiracies. Once you believe historians fabricated the flat Earth story, it's easier to believe scientists are fabricating climate data, or vaccine efficacy, or evolution evidence. Here's the profound irony that reveals how misinformation gets repurposed. In the 19th century, this myth was created by academic elites for high-minded, anti-clerical reasons. They used it to promote rationality, to professionalize science, to give science more authority over religious institutions. It was a tool to build up the expert elite. Today, modern populist movements have inherited that exact myth, but they flipped it. Now some use it to oppose the expert elite, to attack orthodox science, to justify distrust of NASA, universities, the scientific establishment. They appeal to common sense against what they call mystifying theories. Their argument: if they lied to you about Columbus and the medieval church back then, why wouldn't they be lying to you now about NASA, about the photos from space, about climate change? Same lie, first used to build up the authority of science, now used to tear it down. This isn't just about medieval history. The failure to debunk this old lie isn't really about the facts. The facts are clear. It's about the narrative's emotional power, its utility. Its utility in propping up an identity. The identity of the brave skeptic who trusts their own eyes over the experts. And you see the exact same mechanism in anti-vaccine movements and climate denial. It's the same playbook. Old misinformation becomes the foundation for new distrust. That's why this matters. We opened with 2 textbooks. In 18 years, the same author rewrote his own textbook. And one of the most successful lies in Western history was embedded in the curriculum. The evidence proves. Medieval scholars knew the Earth was a sphere. Columbus wasn't arguing about shape, but size. And he was wrong. The flat Earth myth was deliberately fabricated by 3 men across 70 years for political reasons. It entered textbooks to serve 19th century culture wars. It persists because it's useful, first for rationalists, now for conspiracy theorists. The only defense is what we've done here. Go back to the primary sources. Check the medieval documents. See what they actually wrote. Because if historians and propagandists successfully fabricated this universally accepted myth for over a century, what other facts we think we know might also be carefully constructed historical fictions? Check the sources. Question the narratives. Demand evidence. Not just for medieval history, for everything.